encounter with a hobgoblin. In the year Pyeongsin, I found myself in trouble and was imprisoned. A military man named Choi Won-so, who was the captain of the guard, was also involved and locked up. We often met in prison and passed the time talking. One day, our conversation turned to goblins, and Captain Choi said, "When I was young, I encountered a hobgoblin that nearly cost me my life. It was a strange experience indeed." I asked him to tell me about it, and he began, "At that time, I didn't have a home in Seoul, but I heard there was a vacant place in Belttown, so I applied and got it. My father and the rest of the family stayed in the inner quarters while I lived in the front room. One late night, as I was half asleep, the door suddenly opened and a woman entered and stood in front of the lamp. I could see her clearly and recognized her from the home of a scholar friend. I had admired her beauty before, but never had a chance to meet her. Seeing her enter the room, I greeted her warmly, but she didn't respond. I tried to approach her, but she began to walk backwards, eluding my grasp. I hurried after her, but she continued her backward retreat until she opened the gate with a kick and vanished. I searched everywhere, but there was no trace of her. I thought she must have hidden herself and didn't consider anything else. The next night, she appeared again in front of the lamp just as before. I got up and tried once more to reach her, but she repeated her strange backward walk and disappeared through the gate as she had done the night before. I was surprised and disappointed again, but I still didn't suspect she might be a hobgoblin. A few days later at night, as I lay down, I heard a crackling sound from above the ceiling, like paper being crumpled. It was eerie and unsettling in the darkness. Moments later, a curtain descended, dividing the room in two. Then, a large fire of coals dropped right in front of me, filling the room with intense heat. I felt trapped, fearing for my life with no way out. As the first cock crowed in the morning, the noise stopped, the curtain lifted, and the fire disappeared. The room was completely clean, as if nothing had happened. The next night I was alone again, but hadn't yet undressed or lain down when a large, strong man suddenly opened the door and entered. He wore a soldier's felt hat on his head and a blue tunic similar to those worn by yamen underlings. He grabbed me and tried to pull me out. Being young and strong then, I resisted him, and we began to struggle. The moon was bright, and the night was clear. But despite my efforts, he managed to drag me into the courtyard. He lifted me up and spun me around, then carried me to the highest terrace and threw me down, leaving me dazed. He stood in front of me, keeping me captive. There was a garden behind the house, enclosed by a wall. I looked and saw about a dozen people inside, all wearing military hats and coats. They shouted, "Don't hurt him! Don't hurt him!" The man who had assaulted me responded, "It's none of your business. None of your business." But they continued to plead, "Don't hurt him! Don't hurt him!" He retorted, "Never mind. It's none of your business." They cried out, "He is a gentleman of the military class. Do not harm him." He simply replied, "Even if he is, it's none of your business," and then took me by both hands and threw me up into the air. I soared halfway to heaven and then began to descend, passing over Gyeonggi province and Chungcheong until finally landing in Chula. During my flight, I saw all the county towns of the three provinces clearly. Once again in Chula, he threw me up into the air, and again I shot skyward, falling northward until I found myself back home, lying dazed under the veranda terrace. I could hear the voices from the garden shouting, "Don't harm him, harm him." But the man said, "It's none of your business, your business." He lifted me up again and threw me into the air, and I sped off to Chula and returned several times in total. Finally, someone from the garden group stepped forward, took my tormentor by the hand, and led him away. They gathered briefly to discuss and laugh about the incident before dispersing, never to be seen again. I lay still at the base of the terrace until the next morning, when my father found me, took charge of me, and cared for me until I regained consciousness. We all left the haunted house and never returned. Note, there are various reasons why a place might be called a haunted house. The presence of hobgoblins makes it haunted. If a good or superior man enters such a place, the goblins flee and it ceases to be considered haunted. Choi encountered the goblin and suffered greatly. It's not just that people fear goblins, but the goblins also fear people. The fact that so few people they fear is the saddest part of all. Choi feared the goblins, which is why they troubled him. Imbang.
The Snake's Revenge. In ancient times, there lived an archer near the Water Gate of Seoul. He was a man of immense strength and was renowned for his bravery. The Water Gate is a hole in the city wall that allows the waters of the Grand Canal to flow out. It is fitted with iron bars to prevent people from entering or leaving through it. One afternoon, while the soldier was out for a walk, he spotted a large snake trying to pass through the water gate. The snake's head had already slipped through the bars, but its larger body was stuck. The soldier drew an arrow, aimed, and shot the snake in the head. The snake, fatally wounded, died. The archer then pulled it out, crushed it into a pulp, and left it there. Sometime later, the man's wife became pregnant and gave birth to a son. From the beginning, the child was terrified of his father and would cry and appear greatly scared whenever he saw him. As the child grew older, his aversion to his father only intensified. The man, suspicious of this behavior, began to dislike his son instead of loving him. One day, when it was just the two of them in the room, the officer decided to take a midday nap. He covered his face with his sleeve, but kept one eye on the boy to see what he would do. The child, thinking his father was asleep, glared at him, grabbed a knife, and lunged at him. The man reacted quickly, seized the knife, and struck the boy with a club, killing him instantly. He then crushed the boy's body into a pulp, left it there, and departed. The mother, in tears, covered the small body with a quilt and prepared for its burial. After a while, the quilt started to move. Alarmed, she lifted it, only to find that the child was gone and a huge snake was coiled up in its place. Terrified, the mother retreated from the room and never entered it again. In the evening, the husband came home and was told the horrifying story by his wife. He went in to see that everything had transformed into a massive snake. The snake's head bore the scar from the arrow he had shot. He addressed the snake. "We were not enemies to begin with, so I was wrong to shoot you. However, your plan to seek revenge by becoming my son was a terrible act. This situation proves that my suspicions about you were correct and justified. You became my son with the intention of killing me, your father, so why shouldn't I retaliate by killing you? If you try it again, I will surely take your life. You've already had your revenge and have once again returned to your original form. Let's forget the past and be friends from now on. What do you think?" He reiterated this and pressed his proposals, while the snake seemed to listen attentively with its head bowed. He then opened the door and said, "You are free to go now." The snake left, heading straight for the water gate, and slipped out between the bars. It did not reappear. Note: man is a spiritual being distinct from all other creatures. Although a snake has venomous power, it is still insignificant compared to a man. The snake died and took its revenge through the transmigration of its soul. Men die, but I have never heard of them transmigrating as the snake did. Why can't a spiritual being do what animals can? I have seen many innocent men killed, but none of them have ever come back to take revenge on the one who did it unlawfully. This makes me wonder even more about these snake stories. It is regrettable that the superior man knows nothing about the laws governing these things. Imbang.
The Brave Magistrate. In ancient times, in one of the counties of North Hamgyong province, there was a foul-smelling goblin that wrought havoc and death. Numerous magistrates arrived to confront the menace, but within days, each one succumbed to agonizing deaths, dissuading others from taking the post. Over 100 candidates were approached, yet all declined. Finally, a fearless soldier, lacking in social or political influence, accepted the challenge. He was resolute and undaunted, thinking, "Even if there's a devil there, not everyone will perish. I will test my mettle." Bidding farewell, he entered the yamen, finding himself alone as all others had fled. He kept a long knife at his side and remained vigilant, noticing from the first day a fishy stench that grew stronger. After several days, he observed a mist entering through the outer gate, emanating the putrid odor. Day by day, the stench became unbearable. When the appointed time for his demise approached, the yamen runners and servants who had returned fled again. The magistrate kept a jar of whiskey close, fortifying himself. On the fateful day, he became heavily intoxicated and awaited. Suddenly, he saw a figure shrouded in fog, 3 or 4 embraces wide and 15 feet tall, entering through the main gateway. It had no head, body, or arms visible, only terrifying rolling eyes atop. The magistrate sprang up, shouted, and struck it with his sword. Thunder cracked, and the apparition vanished. The foul odor disappeared instantly. Overcome by intoxication, the magistrate collapsed. The attendants, believing him dead, prepared for his burial. They noticed he lay in a different spot than previous victims. As they lifted him, he revived, glaring at them angrily. Fear and astonishment gripped them. From that moment, the foul smell never returned. the temple to the god of war, Yi Hangbok. When he was a child, a blind fortune teller predicted his future, saying, "This boy will be very great indeed." At the age of 7, his father assigned him the task of writing a verse on the harp and the sword, and he wrote, "The sword belongs to the hand of the warrior and the harp to the music of the ancients." At 8, he chose the subject, "The willow before the door," and composed, "The east wind brushes the brow of the cliff, and the willow on the edge nods fresh and green." Upon seeing a painting depicting a grand feast among the fierce Turks of Central Asia, he penned these words, "The hunt is off in the wild, dark hills, and the moon is cold and gray, while the tramping feet of 1,000 horse ring on the frosty way. In the tents of the Turk the music thrills, and the wine cups chink for joy, mid the noise of the dancer's savage tread and the lilt of the wild hot boy." At 12 years old, he was proud and haughty. He dressed well and was envied by the poorer boys in the area. Once, he took off his coat and gave it to a boy who looked upon him with envy. He also gave away his shoes and returned home barefoot. His mother, wanting to understand his actions, pretended to scold him. Yi Hangbok responded saying, "Mother, when others wanted it so, how could I refuse giving?" His mother pondered these things in her heart. By the age of 15, he was strong and well-built, enjoying vigorous exercise and becoming known for his skill in wrestling and shuttlecock. His mother disapproved, deeming these activities undignified, prompting him to focus on his studies. He graduated at the age of 25. In 1592, during the Japanese War, when the king fled to Uiju, Yi Hangbok accompanied him. There, he met the Chinese Ming representative, who remarked in surprise to the king, "Do you mean to tell me that you have men in Chosen like Yi Hangbok?" Yang Ho, the general of the rescuing forces, frequently sought his advice. Yi lived through the troubled reign of Quang Hai and eventually went into exile in Pukchong. As he crossed the Iron Pass near Wonsan, he wrote, "From the dizzy heights of Iron Peak, I call upon the passing cloud to gather the lonely exile's tears in its feathery shroud and let them fall as rain on the palace gates on the king and his shameless crowd." During the Japanese War, in the reign of King Sanjo, the Ming dynasty sent a large army eastward, expelled the enemy, and restored peace. At that time, the Ming general informed the Korean king that their victory was attributed to the assistance of Quan, the god of war. Therefore, he said, "You should not neglect to build temples to express gratitude to him." Accordingly, temples were constructed, one to the south and another to the east of the city. However, there was disagreement over the location of the southern temple. Some preferred it nearer the wall, while others wanted it farther away. Yi Hangbok, an official overseeing the deliberations, was at home one day when a military officer visited him. He was a robust and imposing figure. The officer requested Yi to dismiss all his attendants so they could speak privately. After they were alone, the officer delivered his message and departed. Yi had a close friend staying with him at the time, who had left with the servants but returned later. Seeing Yi's unusual expression, the friend inquired about it. Initially hesitant, Yi eventually confided that the visitor was no ordinary man, a messenger of the god of war. The purpose of his visit was to guide them in selecting the correct site for the temple. Yi explained that the decision was crucial not only for the present but also for future generations. Failure to choose wisely would disturb the god of war. Yi assured the messenger that he would do his utmost to resolve the matter. Upon hearing this, Yi's friend was deeply moved but was cautioned by Yi not to disclose the incident to anyone. Yi diligently pursued the matter, and eventually the temple was erected on the chosen site where it stands to this day, Imbang. The fearless captain. Once there was a soldier named Yi Manji from Yeongnam, known for his immense strength, courage akin to a lion, and a fearsome appearance with his green eyes. He often boasted, "Fear? What is fear?" One day, while Yi was at home, a sudden storm of rain accompanied by lightning and thunder erupted. During one particularly intense thunderclap, a large ball of fire crashed into his house, careening through the veranda, rooms, kitchen, and yard, even bouncing into the servants' quarters several times. Its blazing light and thunderous noise created a scene of terror. Yi remained unperturbed on the outer veranda, thinking to himself, "I have done no wrong, so why should I fear lightning?" Moments later, another lightning bolt struck a large elm tree in front of his house, shattering it to pieces. The rain and thunder subsided thereafter. Upon checking on his family, Yi discovered them all unconscious. With great effort, he revived them. Sadly, they fell ill and passed away within the year. Yi then moved to Seoul and rose to the rank of captain of the Right Guard. Later, he relocated to North Hamgyong province, where he remarried and settled down. Previous occupants of his official residence there had succumbed to supernatural influences, leading others to avoid the place and use village houses instead. However, Yi resolved to confront any fear and return to the old quarters, extensively renovating them. One night, his wife was in the inner room while he was alone in the public office with a light burning before him. Around the second watch, a peculiar object emerged from the inner quarters. It resembled the stump of a tree wrapped in black sackcloth, lacking any distinct outline or shape. It hopped along and positioned itself directly in front of Yi Manji. Two other similar objects followed closely behind, forming a row before Yi, gradually edging nearer to him. Yi retreated until he was backed against the wall, unable to move further. He then demanded, "Who are you, and what kind of devil are you to approach me like this in my office? If you have a grievance or something to address, speak now, and I will attend to it." The middle devil replied, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry." Yi responded, "Hungry are you? Very well, step back and I will arrange plenty of food for you." He then uttered an incantation he had learned and snapped his fingers. The three devils seemed alarmed by this. Suddenly, Manji clenched his fist and struck at the first devil, but it evaded his blow skillfully, causing him to hit the floor hard and injure his hand. They all exclaimed, we'll leave, since you treat guests this way." Immediately, they hurried out of the room and vanished. The next day, he had oxen slaughtered and made a sacrifice to these devils, after which they never returned. Note, people have been killed by goblins not because goblins are inherently wicked, but because humans fear them. Many perished in North Hamgyong, but those who were brave and attacked them with knives or struck them down survived. If they had been afraid, they too would have died. Imbang. In Yonnan County, Wanghai Province, there was a certain scholar whose name I have now forgotten. One day he fell ill and remained in his room, leaning helplessly against his armrest. Suddenly, several spirit soldiers appeared to him, saying, "The governor of the lower hell has ordered your arrest." They bound him with a chain around his neck and led him away. They journeyed for many hundreds of miles until they reached a place with a very high wall. Inside the enclosure was a towering structure that seemed to reach the heavens. Upon entering, the spirits took him to a gate where they led him inside. In the inner courtyard, they laid him face down. When he glanced up, he saw what appeared to be a king seated on a throne, surrounded by attendant officers on each side. Scores of secretaries and soldiers moved about, busy with various tasks. The king's appearance was terrifying, and his commands were awe-inspiring. The scholar felt sweat break out on his back and dared not look up. After a moment, a secretary stepped forward to transmit questions from the king, who asked, "Where do you come from? What is your name? How old are you? What do you do for a living? Tell me the truth. No falsehoods." Trembling with fear, the scholar replied, "My clan name is so-and-so. My given name is so-and-so. I am this many years old, and I have lived for several generations in Yonnan, Wanghai Province. I am not naturally talented, so I have not achieved anything special. Throughout my life, I have heard that reciting prayers with love and compassion can save one from hell, so I have devoted my time to praying and giving to the needy." The secretary, upon hearing this account, promptly went to report it to the king. After some time, he returned with a message saying, "Come closer to the steps, for you have been mistakenly arrested due to sharing the same name. You are free to leave now." The scholar respectfully joined his hands and bowed deeply. Once more, the secretary conveyed another message from the king, saying, "My residence when I was alive was in a specific place and ward in Seoul. When you return, I wish to send a message through you. My stay here has been long, and my outer coat is worn out. Please ask my family to send me a new outer coat. I would greatly appreciate it if you ensure this is not forgotten." The scholar replied, "I will faithfully deliver your majesty's message as directed. However, the ways of the earthly world and the spirit world are so different that when I deliver the message, the recipients may think it nonsensical. Indeed, I will deliver it exactly as you command. But what if they refuse to listen? I should have some proof to substantiate my words." The king responded, "Your concern is valid. This will serve as proof. When I was alive, one of the buttons on my ceremonial attire had a broken edge. I concealed it in the 3rd volume of the Book of History. I alone know of its existence. No one else in the world does. If you mention this, they will listen." The scholar agreed. "That will suffice. But what should I do if they make the new coat?" The king instructed, "Prepare a sacrifice. Burn the coat, and it will reach me." With that, they bid farewell, and the king assigned 2 soldiers to accompany the scholar. As they departed, the scholar inquired about the figure seated on the throne. The soldiers replied, "He is the king of Hades. His surname is Pak, and his given name is O." Upon reaching a riverbank, the soldiers pushed him into the water. He suddenly woke up and realized that he had been dead for 3 days. Upon recovering from his illness, he returned to Seoul, located the indicated house, and meticulously verified the details, confirming it belonged to Pak-U. Pak-U had 2 sons who were already graduated and holding official positions. The scholar wished to meet the sons of the king of Hades, but the gatekeeper initially refused him entry. Helplessly waiting at the red gate until sunset, he was eventually approached by an elderly servant from the inner quarters. He earnestly pleaded to see the master. Upon receiving the request, the servant reported it to the master, who later granted him an audience. Upon entering, he encountered 2 distinguished gentlemen who appeared to be officials. They invited him to sit down and inquired about his identity and purpose. He replied, "I am a student living in Yonnan County, Wanghai Province. On such and such a day, I died and went into the other world, where your honorable father gave me such and such a commission." The 2 listened briefly, then, without waiting to hear everything he had to say, grew very angry and began to scold him, saying, "How dare you, a scarecrow like you, come into our house and say such things? This is utter nonsense that you speak. Throw him out," they shouted to the servants. However, he called back, saying, "I have proof. Listen. If it fails, then you can throw me out." One of the 2 said, "What possible proof could you have?" Then the scholar told the story of the head button with great precision and care. Astonished, the 2 had the book brought down and examined, and indeed in volume 3 of the Book of History was the mentioned button. Not a single detail was incorrect. It turned out to be a button they had missed after their father's death, which they had searched for in vain. Accepting the message as true now, they all entered a period of mourning. The women of the family also called the scholar and asked him specifically about what he had seen. They made the outer coat, chose a day, and burned it before the ancestral altar. 3 days after the sacrifice, the scholar and the Pak family both dreamed that the king of Hades had come and thanked each of them for the coat. They kept the scholar in their home for a long time, treating him with great respect, and became his lifelong friends. Pak-U was a great-grandson of Minister Pak Chom. While in office, he was honest and just, and was highly respected by the people. When he was mayor of Haiju, a dispute arose between him and the governor, which also proved Pak to be the honest man. When I was in Haiju, Choi Chom, a graduate, told me this story. Imbang,